Ever get that feeling when you're at a dinner party and the forks clinking starts to sound a little too much like the Psycho theme song?
Oh, yeah.
We've all been there, I think.
It's a common experience for sure.
Well, we are diving into the art of conversation today,
Okay.
using Catherine Blyth's The Art of Conversation as our guide for this deep dive.
Sounds good.
You know, even with all the ways we can connect online these days, those face-to-face interactions,
Yeah.
they still really matter.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe even more so now.
I think so.
So we're going to unpack a few things,
Hey.
like why a simple hello carries so much weight,
Right.
why small talk is actually like a social compass, and even how silence can be like your secret weapon when you're talking to someone.
Interesting.
It's fascinating, all the things we can learn from just starting a conversation.
I know it seems so simple, right?
It does.
But Blythe really gets into the psychology and even the history of these interactions.
Okay, so let's start with greetings. Blythe calls them the tuning fork of conversation. I love that analogy.
Yeah.
It makes sense though, right?
It does.
A simple greeting sets the whole tone.
Yeah.
What do you think about that?
It really is like the overture to an opera in a way, setting the stage for everything that comes after.
Yeah.
I mean, think about it.
Okay.
How you would greet your best friend
Right.
compared to like a potential employer.
Totally different.
Totally different energy, right?
Yeah.
Different level of formality. And that shapes the whole interaction.
Sure.
Blythe even points out that chimpanzees,
Really?
they have these elaborate greetings,
Wow.
specific handshakes
Interesting.
to establish their hierarchy.
So it's like ingrained in us,
It seems like it.
even going back to our primate ancestors.
Yeah.
But okay, so it can't all be about handshakes.
Right?
How do we apply that to like everyday conversations?
Well, even something as simple as making eye contact and giving a real genuine smile.
Right.
Blythe talks about how important it is to make the other person
Yeah.
feel seen.
Yeah.
Like you're really acknowledging them.
Yeah.
Even in a crowded room.
Right.
It doesn't have to be a grand gesture, a quick smile, a nod, or just saying, I see you.
Yeah.
These tiny interactions,
Yeah.
they lay the groundwork for a connection.
They do.
You know, it's like you're saying,
Yeah.
I acknowledge that you're here.
Right.
And that can be incredibly powerful for people.
It is, I think.
I think so too.
So it's about being intentional, even in those little moments. And that kind of leads us perfectly to small talk,
Okay.
which often gets a bad rap.
Yeah, it does.
But Blythe makes a really compelling case
Does she?
for why it's important.
I'm curious to hear this.
She argues that we shouldn't fear chit-chat.
Hmm.
She even calls it a social compass.
A social compass?
Yeah.
What does that even mean?
Well, it helps us navigate
Okay.
those initial interactions,
Yeah.
find common ground and just build a sense of rapport.
Okay.
Like when you go somewhere new,
Yeah,
you're testing the waters,
Right.
getting a feel for the place.
I like that.
It's interesting how she compares small talk to primate grooming,
Hmm.
highlighting that need for connection and belonging.
Yeah.
But there's this term she uses
What's that?
called philetic speech.
Philetic speech.
Yeah.
I'm not familiar with that.
Can you explain that a bit?
Sure. Philetic speech refers to those little things we say,
Okay.
like when we comment on the weather
Right.
or we ask, how are you? It's not really about the information we're sharing. It's about the act of communication itself.
Right.
It's like we're signaling that we're open to interaction,
Okay.
that we're on friendly terms.
I get it.
So it's like an invitation for more conversation, even if it starts with something as simple as talking about the weather.
Exactly. And this is where the listener's role becomes really important.
How so?
Picking up on those cues, those little invitations
Yeah.
can make all the difference.
Right.
Like someone could say something about the rain, and that could be the start of a really interesting conversation
Right.
if we're paying attention.
It's all about being present, being receptive,
Yeah.
treating small talk like a gateway
Right.
to something more.
I like that.
Blythe also talks about turning fear into imagination when it comes to small talk.
What does she mean by that?
It's about changing our focus.
Okay.
Instead of getting caught up in our own anxieties,
Yeah.
we can focus outward on the other person
Okay.
and be curious,
Right.
like we're on a treasure hunt.
A treasure hunt.
Yeah.
Interesting.
You never know what you might find.
I like that.
So instead of dreading those first few moments,
Yeah.
we can see them as opportunities
Right.
to discover something new.
Let's be honest, though.
Okay.
Sometimes small talk feels forced.
I know what you mean.
Like we're just going through the motions. How can we make it feel more genuine?
Blyth has this great suggestion.
What's that?
Treat it like a game.
A game.
Yeah.
Okay.
Approach every interaction with a sense of playfulness. Focus on the other person.
Right.
Try to learn something new about them.
Okay.
And remember, they're probably just as nervous as you are.
Probably.
So a little bit of lightness can really help.
We can.
Everyone's kind of in the same boat,
Yeah.
navigating those social situations.
Right.
So let's move on to the next stage of conversation.
Okay.
Active listening.
Active listening.
It's more than just hearing words, right?
It is.
It's about interpreting meaning,
Right.
understanding emotions,
Yeah.
and recognizing those subtle cues that shape the conversation.
You mentioned cues, and that reminds me of something Blyth talked about,
What's that?
the cocktail party effect.
The cocktail party effect.
Yeah.
Can you explain that a bit more?
It's that amazing thing our brains can do
What's that?
where we can focus on one voice
Right.
in a noisy room,
Yeah.
like filtering out all the other sounds
Exactly.
to focus on that one conversation.
But here's the thing.
Okay.
Our minds are also making predictions during that process.
Predictions.
Yeah.
How so?
Like anticipating what the other person will say based on what we already understand.
Interesting.
So our brains are creating a kind of running commentary, weaving together what we hear
Right.
with our own interpretations.
And assumptions.
Right. And that can be a good thing
Okay.
and a bad thing.
How so?
It helps us process information quickly,
Yeah.
but it can also lead to misunderstandings.
Right.
Like if you mishear a word or two, it can completely change what you think the other person is saying,
Yeah.
which is why Blyth talks about paying attention to inconsistencies
Okay.
and contradictions.
In conversations, like
Yeah.
when things don't quite add up, that's when we need to listen more closely.
Exactly.
Ask questions and make sure we're on the same page.
And it's not just about clarifying facts.
What else?
It's also about understanding the emotions beneath the surface.
Right.
Are there any changes in their tone or body language
Yeah.
that might mean something more?
Like a hidden message.
Exactly. Are there unspoken feelings
Okay.
or motivations at play?
So we're reading between the lines,
Yeah.
tuning into those nonverbal cues, and realizing that communication, it's about so much more than the words themselves.
It is.
It's like a whole symphony of signals
Yeah.
and interpretations.
And one of the most powerful instruments in that symphony
Okay, what's that?
is often overlooked.
Okay.
Silence.
Silence.
Yeah. That's a good place to stop, don't you think?
Literally.
We'll pick up with the power of silence when we come
Wow.
back
For part 2,
of this deep dive.
into the art of conversation.
I'm looking forward to it.
Me too. Okay, so we're back, and we're talking about the art of conversation
Right.
using Catherine Blyth's book as our guide.
The art of conversation.
Yeah, and before the break, we were about to get into something that seems a little counterintuitive.
Okay.
The power of silence.
Yes. Silence.
We think of good conversations as like
Yeah.
full of chatter.
Lots of back and forth.
Right, but silence can actually play a really important role
It can. It really can.
in making our conversations better.
Silence can be powerful.
It can.
It could be a moment of reflection,
Mm-hmm.
a chance to gather your thoughts.
Yeah.
And it can even be a way to emphasize a point.
How so?
Think about like those
I'm
dramatic
outta here.
pauses
Yeah.
in movies
Oh, right.
or speeches.
Yeah.
They create tension,
Mm-hmm.
anticipation,
Yeah,
and they draw the audience in.
they do.
It's like silence gives the words space to breathe
I like that.
so they can resonate more deeply.
Blyth even talks about how silence can be a tool,
A tool. How so?
like a weapon or a shield or a
Mhm.
tactic in a negotiation.
Interesting.
Imagine a tense standoff.
Uh-huh.
Two people just staring at each other,
Right.
and then silence.
Ooh. Powerful.
Like it can be really intense.
Definitely silence can be used in so many ways.
You can.
To deflect,
Mm.
defer,
Mm-hmm.
or even create a sense of unease.
Right.
But it can also be a sign of respect.
Okay.
Like you're showing the other person
Yeah.
that you're really listening,
Right.
giving them the space to fully express themselves.
So it's not just about the words we say.
No, it's not.
It's about the silences, too, and
Exactly.
how we use them.
It's about being intentional with our silences.
Right.
Recognizing that they're not just empty spaces, but they can actually shape the conversation.
In really subtle ways.
Powerful way.
And sometimes those silences can tell us more than words.
You're right.
Like when someone pauses before they speak,
Mm.
Those hesitation pauses, they can be really telling.
What can they tell us?
Well, maybe they're thinking carefully about what they want to say.
Right.
Or maybe they're struggling with a difficult emotion.
That makes sense.
So instead of jumping in to fill the silence, we can try to listen to it to see what it's trying to tell us.
I like that.
Okay, so that leads us perfectly into the next part.
Okay.
Blyth talks about these challenging personalities.
Challenging personalities?
Yeah.
Like
She calls them conversational beasts.
Conversational beasts?
I think we've all encountered them at some point.
Probably.
Those people who just seem to derail every conversation.
Oh, yeah. I know the type.
Blyth has a whole typology of these beasts.
A typology?
Yeah.
Wow, she's really broken it down.
She has.
That's impressive.
And she gives us some great strategies for dealing with them.
I need those.
So let's start with the demolition ball.
The demolition ball.
This is the person who just seems to find fault with everything.
Oh, I know that person.
They turn every conversation into a debate.
They love to argue.
They do.
It can be intimidating.
Especially if you're someone who likes to keep things harmonious.
Yeah, I don't like conflict.
But Blyth has a good tactic for dealing with them.
Stella,
well, hold up a mirror.
Hold up a mirror?
Yeah.
What does that mean?
Basically, you point out the contradictions in their arguments.
Okay.
You expose the flaws in their reasoning.
Ooh, that's got to be satisfying.
It can be.
Watching them squirm.
Right, but here's the thing.
Yeah.
Blyth also says we should approach them with compassion.
Compassion?
Because their negativity might come from a place of insecurity. Maybe they're afraid of not being heard or valued.
So it's like a defense mechanism.
It could be.
Protecting themselves.
Right.
From feeling vulnerable.
And sometimes a little humor can help.
Humor?
Yeah.
How so?
If you can lighten the mood a bit,
okay,
it can diffuse the tension, create a more positive dynamic.
I like that approach.
So instead of getting sucked into their negativity, try to see them as someone who's hurting.
That's a good way to look at it.
Okay, let's move on to our next beast.
Okay.
The apologist.
The apologist.
This is the person who's always apologizing.
For everything.
Even things that are out of their control.
Oh, yeah, I know that type.
They can be exhausting to be around.
Totally.
And Blyth gives some interesting advice here.
What's that?
Ignore them.
Ignore them.
I know it sounds rude. But she says that when we constantly reassure them and accept their apologies, we're actually feeding their need for validation.
So we're enabling them in a way.
And that can make the problem worse.
So what should we do instead?
Try to shift the focus to something positive.
Like what?
You could compliment them on something they've done well.
Okay.
Tell a funny story. Or just change the subject to something that will empower them.
Help them see themselves in a better light.
Exactly.
Okay, I'm ready for the next beast.
Okay, this one's called the limpet.
The limpet.
They latch on to you in your conversation.
Oh, no.
And they don't let go.
You just keep talking.
And talking. You feel trapped.
Like you can't escape.
Exactly. And they just keep going.
Even when you're giving them signals.
That you want to move on.
Right. They're oblivious.
And Blyth's advice for this one might surprise you.
What is it?
Show them genuine interest.
Show them interest?
Yeah.
But won't that just make them talk more?
It might seem that way.
Yeah.
But Blyth says that their incessant talking often comes from a deep need for connection.
So they just want to be heard.
And understood.
Okay.
So instead of trying to shut them down, try to meet them where they are, acknowledge their need to connect, and really listen to them.
You might even learn something interesting.
You might.
Underneath all that chatter.
Right.
There might be a hidden gem.
A story waiting to be told.
I like that.
So approach them with curiosity.
Okay.
A desire to understand.
And who knows?
What?
You might even learn something valuable.
Okay, so now we come to the most dreaded beast of all.
Oh no, who is it?
The boar.
The boar.
They are the conversational black hole.
Oh no.
They suck the life out of every room.
Yeah.
You know those glazed over eyes? The stifled yawns?
I know exactly what you mean.
They drone on and on.
About things nobody cares about?
In a monotone voice.
That can put you to sleep.
And they come in all shapes and sizes.
Right.
You've got this self-absorbed boar.
Okay.
Who only talks about themselves.
Right.
And their fascinating lives.
And then there's the detail boar.
Oh, yeah.
They bury you in detail.
With no point to the story.
And let's not forget the one-track boar.
Oh, God.
Who just talks about the same thing over and over.
It's like a whole menagerie
of
conversational tedium.
But Blyth gives us some good tactics.
Does she?
For dealing with them.
Thank goodness.
What are they?
First, she says, try to reframe the situation.
Okay.
Instead of seeing them as an adversary, see them as a challenge.
A challenge?
Yeah.
How so?
Like a mental workout.
Okay.
And remember that everyone has something interesting to offer.
Even the bore?
Even the bore.
I'm not so sure.
It's like a treasure hunt.
Okay.
You got to dig a little deeper.
To find the gold.
Exactly.
And if all else fails,
yeah,
Blyth gives us some graceful exit strategies.
Yes.
Ways to escape.
Without being rude.
Those are important.
They can be lifesavers.
Sometimes you just got to get out of there.
Right.
To save your sanity.
So next time you're stuck in a conversation that's going nowhere, remember Blyth's advice.
Be compassionate.
Be curious.
And if all else fails,
be strategic.
Good advice.
And sometimes those challenging conversations can lead to unexpected breakthroughs.
That's true.
So let's talk about those tricky topics.
Tricky topics.
The ones that make people squirm.
Oh, no, yeah.
The taboo subjects.
Are there any conversational third rails
that we should avoid completely?
That's a good question.
Blyth really gets into this.
Does she?
Those sensitive subjects that can start arguments, lead to awkward moments, or make people clam up.
Or lash out.
Exactly. So how do we navigate all of that?
Well, Blyth says there's no easy answer.
Okay.
It depends on a lot of things.
Like what?
The culture, the context, the people you're with.
So we have to read the room.
Yeah.
And see how comfortable everyone is.
Before we dive into anything too sensitive.
Right. Are there any general guidelines?
Blyth suggests approaching these conversations with respect.
Yeah.
Empathy. And a willingness to listen.
Without judgment.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The goal isn't to win an argument.
Right.
Is to understand each other.
So if someone brings up a topic that makes you uncomfortable, you can acknowledge their feelings without having to debate them.
How would you do that?
You could say something like, that's an interesting perspective.
Well,
or I can see how you feel that way.
That validates their experience.
Without necessarily agreeing with them.
Right.
And if the conversation starts to feel inappropriate or offensive,
you can redirect it.
Or just leave.
Sometimes you just got to say, I'm not comfortable talking about this.
It's about setting boundaries.
For yourself.
And respecting the boundaries of others.
Right. But are there any specific taboo topics
that Blyth talks about?
She covers a lot of them.
Like what?
Personal stuff.
Like?
Sex, money, health.
Okay.
And then bigger societal issues. Politics, religion, death.
Those are the big ones?
They're the ones that make people squirm.
So what does she say about navigating those areas?
Well, when it comes to personal stuff.
Like sex and money.
Yeah, she says be careful. If someone brings it up and you're not comfortable, you can deflect with humor.
Okay.
Or change the subject.
Good advice.
And when it comes to politics and religion.
Yeah, those are tough ones.
She says it's important to listen.
Even if you disagree.
Exactly. Everyone has their own perspective.
Shaped by their experiences.
And beliefs.
So there's always something to learn.
Even when you don't agree.
And with death.
Yeah.
She says to approach it with sensitivity.
Right.
And compassion.
It's a difficult topic.
It is.
People have a lot of different emotions about it.
So just be supportive.
And don't push your own beliefs.
Exactly. Are you ready for another beast?
Oh, gosh, another one.
This one can be a real challenge.
Okay, bring it on.
This beast is known as the Grand Inquisitor.
The Grand Inquisitor.
Yeah.
That sounds scary.
It can be.
What are they like?
They're relentlessly curious. Always thirsty for personal details.
Well,
they ask really personal questions.
The kind that make you feel uncomfortable.
Exactly. They probe into every corner of your life.
Making you feel exposed.
Vulnerable.
Ugh. I hate that.
It's like they're interrogating you.
Yeah, not having a conversation.
Right.
Like you're under a microscope.
And it can be really unnerving.
Especially if you value your privacy.
But Blyth has an interesting suggestion here.
What's that?
Give them what they want.
Give them what they want.
I know it sounds crazy.
It does.
But she says their questioning often comes from a deep-seated insecurity.
Insecurity?
Yeah, like they need to control everything. Okay. Categorize the world around them.
To make sense of it all.
Exactly. So instead of getting defensive,
answer
their questions directly.
Honest?
You could even throw in a few juicy details.
Just to keep him happy.
Right.
So it makes like giving them the ammunition.
So keep asking more questions.
But maybe underneath all that,
there's a genuinely fascinating person.
You think so?
Maybe.
With a unique perspective.
It's like those shells. You crack them open.
And inside, there's a beautiful pearl.
That's a nice thought.
Okay, so let's move on to another important part of conversation.
Yeah.
Asking questions.
And questions are important.
They're the keys that unlock doors, the sparks that ignite conversations, the bridges that connect us.
I like that.
But there's an art to asking good questions.
There is.
Right.
Blyth goes deep into the psychology of questions.
Oh, does she?
Yeah. I'm intrigued.
How questions can shape our perceptions, influence our decisions, and even transform our relationships.
Wow, questions are powerful.
They are.
It's amazing how much power lies in a well-crafted question.
Blyth says that questions are more than...
More than what?
Just requests for information.
Okay.
They can be used to elicit emotions, spark curiosity, challenge assumptions, and even inspire action.
So questions are like a Swiss Army knife.
A Swiss Army knife. So many different uses.
I like that analogy.
And just like a Swiss Army knife, it's important to know...
What?
Which tool to use for which situation.
Right.
So Blyth breaks down all the different types of questions.
How does she categorize them?
By their function, their structure, and their impact on the listener.
So she's like dissecting a question.
Exactly.
Yeah.
What are some of the distinctions she makes?
Well, she talks about open-ended questions. The ones that invite longer responses, and closed-ended questions, which get you more specific answers.
So open-ended questions are like wide open spaces you can explore, discover new things.
Well, closed-ended questions are more like...
Like what?
A narrow path.
Leading to a specific destination.
Exactly. She also talks about leading questions.
Okay.
The ones that kind of suggest a certain answer.
Right.
And rhetorical questions. The ones that aren't really asking for an answer. More like statements disguised as questions.
Yeah, to make a point or make you think.
Leading questions can be really persuasive.
They
can subtly influence how we think and feel.
Right. And rhetorical questions are more like...
Like what?
Emphasizing something.
Or provoking thought.
Exactly. And Blyth reminds us...
Oh, what?
That how we ask a question can really affect the response we get. The tone of our voice, our body language, the words we choose.
Yeah.
All of that influences how the other person understands our question.
And how they answer it.
It's like we're composing music.
How so?
Choosing the right notes and rhythms.
To create a certain feeling.
Exactly. And just like a musician, we need to be aware of our audience.
Their mood.
Their interests.
How engaged they are.
So we need to be intentional.
But also adaptable.
Crafting questions that are both meaningful.
And engaging.
But sometimes the most powerful questions are the ones we ask ourselves.
That's an interesting thought.
Blyth talks about the power of self-questioning.
What's that?
Turning our attention inward.
Okay.
And asking ourselves those tough questions.
The ones that can be hard to answer.
Yeah. But they can help us.
How?
Become more self-aware, clarify our values, and make better decisions.
So it's like holding up a mirror.
To our own minds.
Right.
Examining our beliefs and motivations.
But those can be the hardest questions to answer.
They can, but Blyth gives us some prompts.
Like what?
Questions to ask ourselves.
Okay,
like, what am I passionate about? What are my core values? What do I want to achieve in my life?
Those are big questions.
They're the kind that can lead to real insights and change.
And they can also inform our conversations with others.
How so?
Well, if we understand ourselves better, our values and motivations,
we can communicate more clearly.
With more purpose.
And authenticity.
So we're bringing our whole selves to the conversation.
Exactly. And that can make our conversations not just informative, but also transformative.
And enriching.
As we head into the last part of this deep dive.
Okay.
Do you think Blyth has any advice?
On what?
On how to use questions.
Okay.
To make our conversations better.
And deepen our connections with people.
She does. She has a ton of tips and techniques.
Oh, good. I'm ready.
She uses examples.
From where?
History.
Okay.
Literature. And even her own life.
I'm all ears.
Let's hear it.
Okay. So one of her key pieces of advice is to approach conversations as opportunities to explore.
To explore.
Yeah. To ask open-ended questions that invite people to share.
And then really listen to their answers.
Follow the threads that interest you.
Be present in the moment.
Engage with the other person.
And let the conversation go wherever it wants to go.
She also suggests using questions to transition between topics.
How do you do that?
You can say something like, that reminds me. Or speaking of,
those little phrases,
they can keep the conversation flowing.
It's like weaving a tapestry.
Yeah.
Connecting different threads.
And don't forget those questions you ask yourself. Those moments of self-reflection.
That can help us gain clarity.
Purpose.
And a deeper understanding of ourselves.
So conversation is about connecting with others.
And connecting with ourselves.
And in those moments of self-connection, we can find wisdom and insight.
That can enrich our conversations.
And our lives.
We'll be right back.
With the final part.
Of our deep dive.
Into the art of conversation. And we are back for the final part of our deep dive.
Into the art of conversation.
Using Catherine Blyth's book as our guide.
The art of conversation.
It's been a really fascinating journey, I think.
Yeah, it has. We've covered so much ground.
We have, from those simple greetings to the art of asking the right questions.
We've decoded small talk.
We've battled those conversational beasts.
And we've even discovered the power of silence.
And through it all, one thing has become really clear.
What's that?
Conversation is so much more
than just words.
Exactly.
It's like a dance.
Between two people.
Speaker and listener.
Working together.
Creating something.
That requires skill.
And sensitivity.
So as we wrap up this deep dive.
Yeah.
What are some key takeaways?
For our listeners.
What can they use to become better conversationalists?
Oh, I think the most important thing is to be present.
In the moment.
Really engage with the other person.
Listen with intention.
Remember, it's a two-way street.
It's not just about you.
It's about giving and receiving.
Creating a space where everyone feels heard.
Valued. Respected.
And sometimes that means letting the other person lead.
Letting the conversation flow.
Even if it takes you
to unexpected places.
Exactly. And don't forget about curiosity.
Approach every conversation like you want to learn something.
Expand your understanding.
Connect with someone.
On a deeper level.
And don't be afraid of those silences.
Those pauses can be so powerful.
Moments for reflection.
Connection.
Even a little bit of strategy.
And when you encounter those conversational beasts,
remember
compassion and humor.
Powerful tools.
For diffusing tension.
And creating a more positive experience.
And most importantly, be yourself.
Authenticity.
It's magnetic.
When you bring your whole self to the conversation.
You create space for real connection.
Share humanity.
So as we finish our deep dive into the art of conversation,
we encourage you to go out there.
With a renewed sense of awareness.
Intention.
Listen with your heart.
Speak your truth.
And embrace the power of human connection.
Because in the end,
conversation is a gift.
A chance to connect.
To learn. And to create something beautiful together.
So go out there.
And see what wonders you can find.
In those everyday conversations.